I gotta acknowledge something I did not have any cognizance of until perhaps today, actually, fully. Although I might have suspected it in some way, shape, or form before. I did not actually connect the dots today. See, in Texas, they have this manual I've read through on probate law. And I noticed that in a particular table of legal codes connected to probate law, they had number 23 listed as inherit through the child. Inherit through the child. My big problem is I think that's exactly what the USMCA is. I think that's in some ways what NAFTA was. I think that's what this whole Texas hoedown is. I think that at some point certain people thought that they were entitled to expect one of their children to be their retirement, and that in some level in the pension system people swap out their kids. The problem is, if you tell your child at a certain point you expect them to be responsible for your end of life care, then that's one thing. See, it's on you to do what you need to do to make sure that child gets a good start. Is able to go to college, able to get a job, stays out of jail. You don't do that. That's where we're supposed to have some sort of peer reconciliation, right? People in the community are supposed to step up and say, it's not acceptable for you to be acting that way with your kid. Presumably, right? But that's not what's been happening. You got people that are inheriting through their child way, way, way too soon. And then you got older people that are just swapping out kid accounts, child accounts, and drawing on that. Now, my contention is that we made an egregious error when we allowed Social Security to be opened up early for people who did not qualify. This is something I think that was known as soon as the Nixon administration. Now, there's a very different generational expectation of end-of-life care. And what happened was is we had not prepared society to deal with changing cultural expectations and norms around women's participation, participation of people of color, and appropriate boundaries around children, especially in connection with concepts of technology and emerging technology. And at some point, somebody decided they were just going to go ahead and allow for an opening of Social Security and misrepresent that a disproportionate percentage of young people were eligible for Social Security disability insurance, including via mental health care, so that older people could inherit through children. I actually think that's exactly what DAPA and DACA is about. And the problem is, a lot of these people retiring now came of expectation during the onset of the nuclear age. And nobody has acknowledged that there were completely inappropriate boundaries that were established and not maintained since the onset of the Affordable Care Act and perhaps before that. As a matter of fact, I think it was an intentional act of nuclear sabotage that was begun during the Clinton administration. And the material foundation for that had been laid before the Clinton administration. And that there were those in the Clinton administration that knew what was happening and in their own way attempted to address it. But by the time the Starr report came along, I think some people just gave up. And they expected the rest of us that were too young to be held accountable were just going to take the hit. Now, I'm pretty sure a lot of people from my generation agreed to the buy-in. And unfortunately, what I've seen is those people that were allowed to be teachers, leaders, that were supposed to provide an important bridge between younger generations and the seniors, have either been knocked off, have been defamed and slandered so we can be harvested in the meantime, and did not do what was necessary to make sure that we are not in the process of having to come into a generation of leaders that were raised with completely inappropriate boundaries and that are not doing what they need to do to provide a bulwark against exploitation of even younger children at younger ages globally. And so that's why I think that It needed to be addressed. And, if you're not trusting me right now, maybe it's because I'm not supposed to be entrusted in that way. I haven't been allowed to make income that could pay into Social Security for several years. I move masses of money every day. Masses of money every day. And I don't get attributed for any of it. I don't get any acknowledgement of the taxes I pay every day. And I'm supposed to be paying taxes, and I'm supposed to be paying into my Social Security. What was not supposed to happen was that somebody set up a high-risk nuclear deal on me when I was in fourth grade and thought they could leverage it via acts of amortization because my name is Charity and I give it away for free. And when I said no, they wanted me disabled. I already drank my coffee this morning. Let's see what you got. In 2006, Angela Merkel invited me to meet her at the German Chancellery in Berlin. We had made substantial investments in German companies, but the country's vice chancellor, Franz Muntefering, had called private equity investors locusts who devour companies. This began a national debate for Germany that dominated daily headlines and television news. Quote, "I've read some things and want to learn more," end quote, said the chancellor, who thankfully wanted to hear the other side of the critic's argument. Quote, "They say you are locusts," end quote, and she raised her fingers above her head and waggled them like a locust's feelers. Quote, "But I'm a good locust," end quote, I said, making the same gesture. Quote, "But why would they call you a locust?" End quote. I gave her the explanation I give to everyone who asks what we do. We are in the business of buying, fixing, and selling. We are managers and owners as much as we are investors. We try to improve the companies we buy and help them grow faster. The faster a company grows, the more someone else will pay for it. The perceived problems arise when we buy a company that is poorly managed, and we have to fire people to make room for better ones or change strategy. Even once we've improved the company, grown it, and hired more people than it ever had before, the people we fired tend to stay angry at us and become our critics. Merkel told me that when she was growing up in East Germany, she had never learned about business or finance. Her father had been a pastor. She had trained and worked as a physicist. But she was a quick study. Why, she asked, aren't all companies run like private equity-owned companies? Some, I said, need access to bigger pools of capital, which exist only in public markets. A mining company, for example, has to invest huge amounts in exploration and extraction before it can earn any cash flow. As for the rest, maybe they should. The Chancellor's questions cut to a frequent debate on private equity, and one that would intensify with the financial crisis. Do investors like us help or harm the economy? The argument against us has always been that private equity is no more than financial engineering, practiced by a small bunch of people, far removed from the factories, shops, buildings, and labs where the real work is done. That is not us. We step into markets when we see a dislocation. A great company hits a rough patch and needs financing and operating intervention to help it through. An infrastructure project needs capital. A corporation wants to sell a division and invest its capital elsewhere. A terrific entrepreneur wants to expand or acquire rivals, but banks won't lend to him or her. We enter these situations with financing, a strategy to transform the business, and expert operating professionals, and we invest the time needed to turn them around.